Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Suspended Disbelief. This is episode 3 Romantic Cruise, Subplots, and Shipping. As usual, I have here with me another very special guest. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Kitty. I don't really do large amounts of socials or anything else. If you want to find me, you gotta do it physically, and good luck. I cover my tracks.
Today, as the title suggests, we will be discussing romantic subplots. Now, what is romance, and why are we so obsessed with it?
I mean, romance in general would be anything between, honestly, one or more different entities in a thing. These days, it can be anything from a man and a woman, a man and a man, a woman and a woman, three men, like any combination thereof. There can be other things involved that have questionable amounts of what I don't want to say sapience because that usually gets iffy, but I have absolutely seen romantic subplots between like a man and a rubber ducky.
I feel like this is a pretty good description. Any kind of intimate connection between two or more entities. A lot of times, romantic subplots can be played for laughs, other times, they're played for more serious drama. They can vary a lot in their presentation, but there's a natural human attachment to the idea of romance. Why do you think that is?
I mean, obviously, as we've discussed and more people have become outward with it, like not everyone wants romance, but a very large majority of the human race does. Like, very few people want to be alone, and most this is a other people that are around me kind of thing, but even most ace people and aro people that I know, they still want companionship. It might not look the same, but everyone wants to be somebody, and it's honestly fun when it comes to watching. It's nice to live vicariously through people.
Do you feel like that the living vicariously through people is why romantic subplots and shipping is so prevalent in so much media?
So, I mean, certain amounts of shipping, yes, especially when you start getting into more fan ships where it turns into, well, that's very obviously a self insert that you put in to ship with them. But even outside of that, at the same time, there's also just the, to put it into a sports analogy, people just like to root for it. We all want true love to win, and it's one of those, it's nice to just do it. I know I have friends that have turned basically how romance plots go. I've heard them talk about it in the same way that I hear people talk about their favorite sports teams. I have heard people swear up and down angrily that their canon, their ship wasn't the one that was made canon. I've done it multiple times.
I'm gonna take a wild guess and say Nala's.
I mean, yeah, no, that one drives me nuts. That's still horribly wrong. How dare they retcon an entire, like, they built up for it. The entire first 100 plus episodes were building towards that one, and then no.
For context, for any of our viewers that haven't seen Fairy Tale, there is a very strong connection between the characters of Natsu and Lizana throughout the majority of that show, only for the canon pairing of Natsu to be a completely different character.
They have it set up to be like childhood friends turned relationship, and then they were lost and then reunited, and then immediately the second that happened, it's like, no, we're not doing that. Like once they reunite, you have maybe two arcs where it's still they might get together, and then it's immediately jumping ship to the new one.
Let's talk about the bad cases. What makes a bad romance?
I mean, if we're talking in general, especially these days, there's a lot of we've come to recognize, and it's become more socially acceptable to recognize toxic relationship stuff that if it were to actually happen, it would be basically, hey girl, you should dump him, just because, and it does go the other way, and that's actually a legitimate problem we have with if the woman in the relationship is toxic, especially in media, then it's downplayed a lot, and the man has to go along with it, and it's been a ridiculous thing. But they're even outside of just purely toxic ones. Sometimes it's just those two are a bad match, like where everyone wants the full opposites attract. But as it turns out, if you in real life had a clean freak and a slob, it doesn't end pretty.
In terms of toxic behaviors that get romanticized a lot, I always think of a quote from Red versus Blue that comes from Tucker, who is a very, very famously. I'm not going to call him a womanizer because that would imply that he actually got any action, and he doesn't. But he's very much someone that wants to. Uh, but there's a quote he states where he says something along the lines of, "Listen, the only difference between stalking and romance is that when it happens in a movie, they call it romance."
Yeah.
And it always just makes me think of those dramas where one of the characters does just like follow the person to certainly an extent that pushes boundaries. The example that pops into my head is Twilight. There's scenes where Edward just appears in her room while she's sleeping and just watches her sleep.
Oh, yeah, no, but I mean, now you've opened a door because there's not just that. Twilight is honestly a great example of that, where the entire series is between, okay, two different relationships. Both of them are awkward at best and just downright creepy because, especially in that one, you get into the ageless versus teenager. And admittedly, I guess that one, from what I've heard from friends, they did a decent job of apparently vampires somehow halt their brain development, which means technically he's still a teenager, but at the same time, that also no, because I suppose she gets bit at the end, doesn't she?
After she turns 18, so technically she's more developed than he is.
Yeah, which is awkward. And then if you go into that, there's also the fan fiction that shall not be named that involves 50 different parts of the same color. Where the best description I've seen of it is if the male lead was in a trailer park instead of a mansion, it'd be a horror story.
Yeah, I can definitely see that.
And that is a recurring thing, and there's a lot of it. And believe me, I grew up with a sister who read a bunch of trashy romance novels, and I still adore them, and I love the subplots. But a lot of them are like romanticizing some honestly really unhealthy things. There ends up being like, oh, he was so persistent. She kept turning him down, but he kept trying. And then eventually he changed her heart, and it's so romantic. Whereas in real life, that's called, dude, she said no. It means no. Why are you still pestering her?
For sure. I will say a case that comes up often in fiction is there's a very difficult balance to strike between a character pushing someone's boundaries in a healthy way and a character just completely going over the line. Uh, for an example that I saw that was better received but still did spark some controversy, in season 4 of Ruby, the character of Sun Wukong, who at the time was very much strongly shipped with the character of Blake, he sees her running away and decides to follow her. And she's upset at being followed, but it's done in a way where there's not any stalkery implications to it. It's very much handled in a way where he is not attempting to push any sort of feelings onto her. He followed her out of a genuine concern for her safety because she had just fled from this massive battle and he had no idea where she was going and she had left her team, so she was going out alone.
I mean, yeah, that one to me, it sounds like it's less of an issue with how it was written and more so there is a very fine line between what counts as being supportive and what counts as being creepy. And it is really hard to tell. And oftentimes that line can be straight, like stuff like that, where it's like, personally, I think that was fine. Like, yeah, he didn't push his feelings onto her. He followed her after he saw that she had was having problems emotionally and is like, hey, can I help? I'm assuming that's what he did, right?
I mean, the part that sparked a lot of controversy was that he didn't approach her directly at first. He definitely stayed hidden for a chunk of time while he was following her and didn't reveal himself until there was an actual problem that needed fighting.
I mean, yeah, that gets into the little bit of the creepy, but at the same time, I find that one is, and this sounds horrible, but like I said, there is a fine line between it where there is genuinely caring, where you could also view that as he was trying to give her space. She wanted to be left alone and not be followed, and he gave her that while still being able to protect her and make sure she's fine. Like, yeah, it's overstepping boundaries, but that's not unforgivably overstepping boundaries.
The trope that fiction likes to play with a lot, where a character is doing something that in real life, if you didn't respect that, you would be overstepping boundaries, but there's exacerbating circumstances in the fiction where it's just really not a good idea to let it be.
Oh, yeah, no, absolutely. Well, plus, you got to think in real life, you're not going to stalk someone that well.
Fair. Also, in real life, you're probably not fighting a giant kaiju in the middle of an ocean.
Hopefully. Still crossing fingers for Pacific Rim, though.
Is that really the kaiju fiction we want?
I mean, no, but to be honest, Godzilla is not much better. Like, the issue is kaiju fiction is inherently, like, destructive and probably really bad for any of the individuals who actually live through it. But
Oh,
that's a different tangent.
I don't know. Ultraman Rising was a pretty positive take on it. That one's all about him protecting and preserving the kaijus while also preventing them from causing any damage.
Oh, I actually do have a very good example on one of the horribly toxic shipping, like ridiculously bad, but most people are fine with it because of the way the genders are oriented.
Go on.
Namely, thanks to my significant other, I have basically finally gotten into watching Chainsaw Man. Fantastic. Can't recommend enough for anyone that is old enough to watch it because that is not child appropriate. But the relationships in that one, that none of them are established, but they come really close, a lot of those relationship points are ridiculously toxic and bordering on SA. And that is not cool. But because the male is the one on the receiving end, everyone, the responses are 9 out of 10 going, oh, he's so lucky. Where it's like, those are really toxic ships. If the genders were reversed, this would have been like taken off the air immediately.
I'm gonna assume this is Makima.
Uh, Not just Makima, like Makima, the girl with the eye patch as well, like in her first real introduction outside of immediate fight scenes and stuff, involves some very questionable scenes where, yeah, she's drunk, but she absolutely pushes herself on him multiple times. And if the situations were reversed, if it was a drunk guy pushing himself on a woman, that is absolutely atrocious and it should be viewed as such. From what I gathered with this one, is it is supposed to be viewed that way. The author didn't write it as a positive thing, but a lot of the audience, especially when it comes to the male on the receiving end of this kind of stuff, tends to look towards it positively. If you want to go towards more like innocent things, I was watching, oh, what? I think it was Fuller House. And it was some small thing with the younger girl characters like messing with the little boy, and it's like if this scene was gender swapped, there is no way this would have flown. This is not cool. And that was honestly one of the big things as I got older with like, yeah, so much of this stuff is ridiculously unhealthy. It's toxic. We just don't recognize it because a lot of our stuff right now is set up towards if it's toxic towards the guy, it's okay.
I'd say that even goes back a while with the femme fatale trope, which was made as an inversion of the of like the kind of charming villain archetype, the
Yeah.
bad guy that's all suave and debonair, but that bad guy is always played as nasty for weaponizing his charisma. Whereas in a lot of fiction, the femme fatale trope is, and there's valid reason for this, because it is in cases meant to be empowering, especially considering it comes from times when um, women showing or using their sexuality was a thing that was frowned upon. But in more modern takes, the femme fatale trope can definitely go into that area of this is not okay.
Oh, yeah. I mean, to be fair, a lot of that and the femme fatale, and yeah, you're not wrong. A lot of it's through there. But part of it is that whole liberation thing has been moved into it, but some of that comes from that was the only way women could be taken seriously. There's an entire thing with that. That's actually why even going back to real life, you have Matahari in World War II that basically seduced and murdered a whole bunch of Nazis, and it's like, yeah, no. That was because when people didn't everyone underestimated the woman that could actually do stuff like that. They're like, oh, she's loose, she's easy. And it's like, yeah, no, she was actually doing something.
Yeah. I think the fiction example that comes to mind is probably Poison Ivy, which more recently she's definitely been handled a lot better, but that's because she's literally grown and developed as a character in no small part thanks to Harley Quinn's influence. But certainly not too long ago, Poison Ivy could definitely get very, very into essay territory with people.
Oh, massively. And that's an entire thing. And yeah, as much as it hurts, because as you and most of our friends know, I am very much a Harley Quinn fan. I have always been, even as a kid, yeah, I enjoyed her because, hey, look, it's the clown girl. As I got older, it was her entire story. She is a massive thing of, yeah, you can be with an abusive partner and then you can get over it, move past it, and grow stronger from it. Even back before her full, I hate saying it this way, but it's the best comparison I have. Even before her Deadpool-esque rebrand, she still had that. We can go back to the brief stint where the Riddler went clean and he was a straight up private investigator doing work, and Harley was clean and moving past it. And it's an entire recurring thing with her getting over. She just kept relapsing up until she got the full thing. But I mean, that's another one with toxic ships. But that one was supposed to be like the Harley Joker. But at the same time, even though the entire point of that is it was a toxic, abusive relationship, how many people have you seen walking around with, oh, I want a relationship like Harley and Joker?
I feel like those people aren't as familiar with the source material as they think they are.
I think even with that, a lot of them are saying it for the sake of being edgy and different, but at the same time, like, yeah, no, they don't know the source material. It's a whole thing. But because of that, when Harley got her huge rebrand, Harley and Ivy have been talking about ships. They've been a ship so long that back when Paul Dini was making it in the 90s, back when lesbianism could barely be shown, they were making jokes. I have a Christmas comic with Harley going to rescue Ivy and trying to get help from Batgirl and going, so are you and Soups, like together? Like you and Ivy? And it's like, and it's a recurring thing where even before they could say it, Harley and Ivy were a couple. Like I'd argue they're not one of the original, but they're one of the first like big, because that's the other thing with ships is that's actually sorry, I'm they were one of the first big ones, and they were the first big one of the secret lesbian or gay relationship, because gay shipping has been a thing forever, because historically we didn't get very much representation, so we kind of had to work our way in. And you have gay coded characters, which has been a thing. What is it? There's a recurring thing where 90% of the old school Disney villains were very gay coded. But we didn't have much direct representation. We definitely didn't have it in relationships. It was always that token butch lesbian down the street in the sitcom, or it was that token gay best friend. Like there was not a whole lot. So that's where a lot of like the oh, this is they're gay for each other shipping came from. Is there's not much like outside of straight up gay fiction or lesbian fiction there, which are explicitly like romance for that style. Like Yaoi and Yuri became a really huge thing mid aughts.
I wouldn't know the
Like out
exact time frame on it.
sometime around there is when it first started to like become into the zeitgeist. Basically, when anime got big in America. But outside of those explicit ones, there wasn't really much in the way of LGBTQ plus romance. So we made our own. And some of them we didn't make, like Harley and Ivy. It's been established by like the creators as time went on. It's like, yeah, they were supposed to be a couple without actually saying they were a couple. It was a huge thing. Like they were joking at it. They just weren't technically allowed to say it because, in part, the Comic Codes Authority had way too much power for way too long.
I mean, I honestly feel like it goes back to their initial team up in the Batman the Animated Series after they make that escape together where uh, they meet for the first time. Basically, like the next time you see them, they're in an apartment together wearing nothing but oversized T-shirts.
Oh yeah, and there's what the entire Christmas episode where they're basically together. Harley's whining to get a tree, and she's like, "Aren't you Jewish?" And then Ivy's like, "Does it?" And it was a whole thing, fantastic. But yeah, no, I collect a lot of Harley Quinn stuff, which means I have a bunch of the collections of basically her classic comics back when it was actual Paul Dini, back when she first jumped to the comics. And a lot of them are just straight up. Like, they were in a couple in every manner except actually saying it. Don't get me wrong, they didn't like officially canonize it until the New 52 run of Harley Quinn, because that was at the point where they could. Like, it was a legitimate thing where, but overall, that's why one of the big ones, there are two big ones going on in the past couple of years with ships where people are rejecting the main ones. And that is Wicked is a huge one where everyone ships Glinda and Elphaba. And that is a recurring thing because, yeah, there is a bunch of chemistry. And I will be the first one to say, not every relationship has to be romantic. I am a huge fan of platonic love, and it doesn't need to go further than that. Also, I gotta say, I am adoring of, at least in the new movie, Fiero is the most wonderful himbo, and I'm fine with the love triangle. The girls don't need to get together. The other one right now is, well, I suppose less right now, is Wednesday. The two female leads were shipped massively. I didn't have Netflix at the time. I didn't even know there were male love interests until I started watching the show.
To be fair, that's a case that I feel is very poignant for the slide we're on. because one of the talking points is poor chemistry, and I feel like a lot of the reason ships like that end up happening is that you will get two characters with stronger chemistry than the intended love interests for them.
Oh yeah. I mean, you can also run into when shipping goes wrong. So there was an entire thing. One of my favorite series ever is Adventure Time. And basically, because the author, from what I remember, because this has been a while since I've looked into it, he very much wanted Marceline and Bubblegum together, like really early. That was why there was the entire chunk after the Lich, where, yeah, Bubblegum was a princess and then just, or was the same age as Finn, and then just boop, back to normal. This was fun, but we can't keep it up this pretense. And it was this whole thing, and it was, I personally thought it was to make the way for Princess Bubblegum and Marceline as a canon ship. And I don't remember if it was the creator getting annoyed with it, or in all likelihood, I'm pretty sure it would have been the network. Because at that time period, we were getting closer to acceptance, but on a kids show, having a gay couple was a no. There was enough issues with Steven Universe, which I think at that point, Steven Universe was a solid year or two after that point, but there was a lot of talk about how the Bubbline relationship was canceled because there was so much adult art of them. Like, the ship got so weird and so excessive that even if it wasn't the writer, if it was the network still backed away from it hard.
I mean, they did eventually get it back on track.
But you gotta think they did hint at it. And that one's admittedly part of the whole you weren't allowed to have gay relationships because that's viewed as apparently sexual content because how dare they? And there's the entire, straight slant towards everything. But you weren't allowed to have those in a kids show, so they could only hint at them. I mean, what? Legend of Korra only had Korrasami like canonized in the last episode, and there gave enough room to give some, oh, maybe it happened, maybe it didn't. The only reason why Steven Universe got away with Ruby and Garnet or Sapphire and Ruby is because technically they weren't girls, they weren't guys. It was arguably two NBs getting together, which was an entirely separate thing that NB at that point wasn't even big enough for it to register. So it was like not a thing. We had so many of them, Bubblegum and Marceline. It was hinted at. There was a whole lot of suggesting towards it, but their relationship wasn't officially canonized until Distant Lands.
I feel like for a lot of people, and I know what you're saying by officially canonized, but I still feel like for a lot of people, I'm Just Your Problem was a point of no return as far as that went.
Oh yeah, and absolutely. It was really obvious from when they went to get Hambo back from Masha, but
Because
like there, it was obvious. It was very much set up, but they never were allowed to explicitly say it. And again, that brings back to the whole they weren't allowed to, and so we made our own ships. And some of them were obvious, and it's very much like, yeah, the writer intended. They've come back and out and out said it like, yes, this is what we intended, but we were never allowed to. What was it? Gravity Falls got in trouble because in the Love God episode, there was when it flashed between a bunch of couples that the Love God had helped. One of them was an older lesbian couple, and the censors were like, "No, we're not putting this in." It was an entirely huge deal. That's why when the Owl House had the relationship between Luz and Amity officially canonized like halfway through the first season, it was such a big deal for everyone. Like, I
second
loved
season.
second season.
Yeah.
Are you sure it was second season? Because I'd argue Grom, basically, that was enough for the rest of us.
I'm pretty sure it was okay. Oh no, you're right. Grom. Yeah, because you see the note. Okay,
You see the note, and they
that's
had the
not.
very obviously get. Yes, the
That's
relationship
not.
wasn't canon yet, but it
That's
was.
not relationship canon, but that is interest canon.
Yes, and to be fair, even getting that was too far. Like having a character admit, because I think officially it's not stated, but if I remember right, Luz is bi and or pan, and
It, it
Amity's gay.
it is stated that she's pan in season 3. In there's a little
Mm,
montage.
her mom, yeah,
Yeah,
all of that. So yeah, no, that was a thing where yeah, and the thing is, we waited so long. Like I loved Owl House to begin with. When I got to the episode of Grom, I almost cried. Like seeing that kind of relationship actually shown meant a whole lot. And at that point, I was actually in my late 20s. Oh God, I'm old. But like, I legitimately, I was old and I watched that and it's like, and we're starting to get to the point where thankfully these aren't as few and far between anymore. We have entire movies where it's like, yeah, the main character is gay and it means absolutely nothing. One of my favorite movies that have come out in the past, oh, this wasn't like 2002 ish. It was like end of COVID lockdown where we could still go out, but it was the Strange Planet.
yeah,
And the grandson was gay, and all it amounted to with like the grandfather was like, we're gonna find you a good girl, and he's like, actually, I like there's this guy I'm looking at, and instead of the grandfather like starting something, because I was immediately in theater with my nephew going like, oh god, the grandfather's like, then we'll help you get him, and mind you, the grandfather's ideas were like ridiculously toxic and actually play into this where it's like, so what you need to do is you need to get her in mortal peril and then you need to save her life and then she'll love you forever. And then the grandson's like, that sounds really toxic, Grandpa, let's not do that. But yeah, no, so a lot of them, we get most of our gay ships just because they didn't give it to us. Like we were absolutely desperate for it in mainstream. There has also been. So, this is one of the more ridiculous ones when you go into fan fiction. Are you familiar with Super Hulock?
yes. The idea that Supernatural, Doctor Who, and Sherlock share a universe.
So, this is less that they share a universe and more that it is a entire, like, genre of fan fiction at this point. And there was a lot of running thing as to why it was the only ships that came out of Super Hulock were gay. Every single one. It was like Dean and I believe it was specifically Matt Smith Doctor or Dean and Sherlock. Like it was always two guys. And there's a lot of thought process, a lot of people go into it's because a lot of those writers did not write women very well. So the men were more interesting. So then, okay, we're going to ship this character I like with this character I like because that's how a lot of it goes is I like these two characters. It's the whole concept of I like pizza, I like ice cream. Obviously, if I put them together, I'm going to like it even more. And sometimes it works. It's like this really weird thing, but oftentimes it's like you tried way too hard to make that work.
I feel like this loops back around to the point of when a character's intended love interest, they just have so poor chemistry with them that it highlights how good a chemistry they have with someone that wasn't an intended love interest. The like on the topic of Supernatural, I know that Dean and Castiel is a very popular ship because the way they're written and the way those actors play off of each other, they do have excellent chemistry as characters.
So, from what I gathered, that is absolutely true, but at the same time, they have also been gay baited so hard where the writers will tease it. and they'll be like, yes, obviously this will happen, and they never follow through with it because they're trying to get the audience.
Oh yeah,
But
it's the Connor Kent Tim Drake conundrum.
yeah, and then there's also, mind you, we've talked about with bad partners where it's their current partner is bad, but we also have, if we want to go back to Doctor Who, basically every single romance partner after Rose feels wrong. The only one that has ever felt acceptable is River, and I think that one's because she was so new and so very much in line with the Doctor with that level of insanity. They met backwards, all whole 9 yards. I think that worked for her. But the issue with, like, they were after Rose, we got Martha. Martha was a lovely person, but I feel like the romance plots kind of ruined it. Like, they can add the romance in, but at the same time, the entire thing was just unrequited love. And admittedly, that's not too bad. And then we have my favorite companion ever of Donna Noble, where she's the best companion for the Doctor because there was no romantic subplot.
Yeah.
Period. Like, there was negative, and they were friendshiped. Like, they were just really good mates, and that was wonderful. And everyone has issues with the Jodie Whittaker era, and that is not Jodie Whittaker's fault. She is still one of my favorite Doctors, but her seasons were questionable at best. But at the
Fantastic,
last season,
fantastic actress, terrible writer.
oh yeah,
Not her being a terrible writer, she was at the mercy of a terrible writer.
at the last season, it was not even the last season, it was the second half of her last season. They forced a shoehorned in unrequited romance with Yasmin. And it's like, why did you need that? What was the point of this? I There was no need. And I'm always happy for let's add gay. There's an entire thing with Doctor. That's why I'm not even going to try and pronounce his name because I'm going to fuck it up. Sorry. The new Doctor that's why I love him, is because he is the first Doctor we've had that actually looks like he's bisexual.
Shooty Gatway?
Yes. Like I said, not trying to pronounce it. So
I
he's the
think I said
first
that
one we
right.
have.
I'll
He's the
probably
first one.
I'll probably get ripped to shreds if I said that wrong, but I think I said it right.
Probably. He's the first one we have that actually feels like he's gay. Because it's been an entire thing where they were basically any of the new Doctor, anywhere from Eccleston on. Because, I mean, when Eccleston first met Tennant, they were flirting half the time. It was not Tennant. When Eccleston first met Captain Jack, I used to know his name. But when the Doctor first met, it's like, yeah, he's bisexual, and they were very much flirting with each other, and it was a recurring thing. Every time Captain Jack comes back, he's flirting with the Doctor, no matter. That's still one of my favorite quotes from Doctor Who, period, is, yeah, humans went out into the universe and danced.
I mean, Jack flirts with literally everyone.
And anything, for the most part. But the Doctor flirted back solidly in those episodes. And don't get me wrong, two of the most terrifying episodes. But, like, the Doctor flirted back, and the Doctor is been basically confirmed bisexual for almost at least the entire new run. I will admit, I haven't watched a whole lot of old Who.
I mean,
And,
you want to talk gay chemistry with the Doctor? Tennant and the Master.
oh yeah. But I mean, you can also go. So the Doctor and the Master, I've argued, have had that kind of chemistry since their induction. I've seen some of the old stuff, like they have that kind of, and even the Master's name brings stuff. And that was one of the things that so many people complain about the Master from Jodie Whittaker's run. And I agree with most of them, but at the same time, I thought Rami played some of the best Master I've ever seen. There was just the Rasputin moment and the really weird, like, almost trying to directly ship with there. And then I'll never forgive them for removing Missy, because we also had the Doctor has been shipped with the Master multiple times. When the Master gender bent, the Doctor was absolutely being shipped with her. It was a kind of friendship, kind of love thing.
I mean, her introduction was literally pinning him to a wall and kissing him.
Oh, yeah, no. Once again, also on the lines of if the genders were reversed, that'd be SA. But,
I
like,
mean,
it's a.
the way they play it, though, is hilarious because of Capaldi truly has a talent for bringing emotions to their peak, and the deer in headlights level of just sheer panic he plays in that moment is beautiful.
Oh, absolutely. Like, but that's an entire thing. And getting back to there are good ships and there are bad ships. And arguably, what 90% of them come down to is it's all personal preference. It's just like your choice in romantic partner. There is, if you want to get into technicalities, yeah, the canon ship is the right ship, but you have that Nick Fury quote. I noticed the council has made a decision. However, as that's a stupid decision, I've elected to ignore it. That's a legitimate thing that people have, and I'm a firm believer in 9 times out of 10, any ship that you want is the right ship. Some of them are so ridiculously unhealthy, you should really look at yourself and wonder why you think that's a good option.
Like Harley and the
But
Joker.
yeah, there are some ships that's like that is so unhealthy, or there's some ships that just go against. So I don't mean this in a generic. I mean this in a more like vague sense. There are some ships that go against what amounts to common decency. And I'm not saying like, oh, start the engines, because I'm fine with those. I get it. But at the same time, if you're shipping a brother and sister, I don't care if it's adopted. That still is very much wrong to me. Because I will fight to the death of that argument because, well, what? We also want to talk about how shipping ruins stuff. Fire Emblem. This is a weird tangent, but I think it follows with how ships can ruin things or
You're
how one bad ship can sink something.
you're all cousins in three houses, right? Is that where this is going?
So, wrong one. Where this is going is starting with what I consider the modern ones. We go from Awakening to Fates to Three Houses, and now we have Engage. There has been so many problematic ships between the first three that in the Western release of Engage, they actually removed the ability to finish relationships. Because you can get support conversations from C to B to A. Some of them add pluses where there's just an extra conversation, and you can get that. And then what used to happen and what happens in the Eastern release for Engage is you can get some relationships to S. And it wasn't until Three Houses that you could have a gay relationship, and part of that was because they needed to have kids for the plot of Awakening, and then because Awakening sold so well, they had kids for the plots of Fates. Because I'm talking about shoehorned, but there were ships in each of them, each of those three Fates, Awakening, and Three Houses. There were ones that were seen so bad for the Western audience that when Engage was released to the Western, they literally just cut off all of the S ships. You could get every other relationship up, but you could never get to the S rank. You can't marry anyone off. Because in Awakening, the issue was one, everyone's favorite waifu from Awakening is you want to talk about ridiculously toxic, and if the gender was swapped. Like, she's a straight up stalker and murdery, and she's a tsundere in the most horrifying sense.
That sounds more
But there
like a
was
yandere.
Yandere, sorry, not soon. I get them confused when I'm speaking. And then you also have, in as Japanese is a wont to do, you have the ancient dragon that looks like she's 13, which of course meant if you ship her with anyone, it's just unclean. One of my favorite comics is it shows everyone getting shipped and she's there going, I'm 100 years old. And then everyone's running away from her going, stranger danger. And it's like, yeah, okay, they gave the technical reason where it's like, okay, you loopholed it out of being not cool. Like, you loopholed it out of being illegal, but it still feels a little bit wrong. So that one got a bunch of flack. Admittedly, a lot of this was retroactive when it came out. It was people being like, dude, that's not cool, and moving on. In Fates, you have the entire base point of the plot is you were raised as a princess of one kingdom, find out you were kidnapped by the other one. And the thing is, you can romance all 6 of your siblings, 3 from either kingdom. The ones that you were raised with, it's the thought of, oh, you're not really our sibling, it's fine. The ones that you thought were your birth siblings, it's like, oh, as it turns out, you weren't actually directly related. And it becomes this whole, like, once again, they loopholed it out of it being technically it's fine. But at least from my personal perspective and from a lot of people's, it's like, dude, no, that's still uncool.
Yeah, why would you make it like that
And
in the first place?
yeah. And my argument with Three Houses, because I'd like to start with the Three Houses of, I don't actually find it particularly wrong because there's extenuating circumstances. It goes into the, I actually find these ones better. Of in Three Houses, you end up being an instructor to all the students, and all of the other characters, basically including 90% of the romance options, are students. The difference with this one, and why I don't find it nearly as bad, your character is canonically younger than half of the students. This is like a college where you were a prodigy that was picked up, and it's like, okay, yeah, some of them, they're younger, but I think actually that one does a bit better on the age gaps. Like, everyone's age is relatively fine, but there's still the whole power dynamic of a teacher and the student, and it became a whole thing, and I guess the complaints from that one was enough that when Nintendo released Engage to the Western audience, it's like, nope, you know what, you guys keep complaining, no more shipping for you. So they ended up basically removing half of a mechanic. Like, they removed the end goal of a mechanic because the shipping was some combination of toxic and just that one. A lot of it comes down to a clash of cultures. I'm not one to say one culture is right over the other, but they have different views over what's acceptable when it comes to that. And when they clashed, it ended up poorly.
Yeah. So to summarize for what makes a bad romance, don't force characters with bad chemistry together, and don't make it weird.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, mind you, the entire point of that game is very much like there's the strategy element, but a good chunk, especially if the modern titles, is it's a matchmaking simulator. Like, you have fun just matching up random people that don't fit.
I mean,
And I missed that.
that's the general summary I've heard of Fire Emblem, is that it's someone made dating sim chess.
Yeah, no, that's fair. And just like I said, it comes down to, I mean, the other one with that one, and the big lesson that I think is the takeaway for, again, at least with a Western audience, because we're coming from this from a Western audience view, don't loophole things into being okay.
Yeah, if you need to make the loophole, there's already a problem.
Pretty much. Like, I still stand by the age. It might be a personal thing. I think the age thing fixes the Three Houses where it's like, yeah, your character is the same age as these students. It doesn't ever feel like there is that traditional teacher-student power dynamic in that game. But I can also see where it's like a hell no, not touching.
Yeah, to me, that's a case of, like, if you're writing a story like that, just don't risk it. Just don't
Oh,
risk it.
yeah, no. And I mean, that's part of it is like, I'd argue if you're doing a straight story and it's not, okay, here, the person, if it's not a game, like, and you're just writing a story, no. Just general rule of thumb. If it looks bad, it probably is.
So we've talked a lot about bad romances, so why don't we move on to good ones? All right. So, how do you make compelling romantic chemistry?
I mean, part of it is you gotta lay the groundwork from the beginning. Nobody likes an 11th hour romance, and wishy washy can be problematic. Like, you don't have to guarantee, but I mean, the other option is like part of making a good one, and I think this is really like I'm not happy with the fact that I'm going back to bad romance, but I think a lot of how to make a good one is avoid making the bad ones. Part of making it compelling is just avoid those missteps that all the other ones did. Like, yeah, make it an actual pairing. Let them have chemistry. Let it slow burn instead of being an immediate, hey, let's jump in together. Like, I am a big fan of reading webtoons, and some of my favorite romances are just straight up. Yeah, they're together, it's cute, it's adorable, and like it moves on from there as much as complex and you need to have tragedy to make it. I think that's doesn't have to be true. Like
I
some of my favorite tragedies, the romance was never the tragedy.
I think there's more to it than that. Because avoiding the missteps is not going to create a good dynamic. I do think that it takes effort to make chemistry between characters. Um, let's bring up the Wednesday example again. The reason why so many people attached to Wednesday and Enid, even though both of those characters have their own love interests in the show, is because Wednesday and Enid had more chemistry with each other.
I never finished it. I got about halfway through, and I am personally a Wednesday Enid shipper.
Yeah. But
But
but like the point there is the reason why Wednesday and Enid is more compelling isn't just because Wednesday's love interest isn't compelling, right? Like, that just makes you not want that pairing. That's not why you gravitate towards Wednesday and Enid. Why you gravitate towards Wednesday and Enid is because their dynamic with each other is interesting. There is there is a genuine draw. You enjoy seeing them on screen together. The two characters provoke sides and aspects of each other and push each other's development in ways you want to see more of.
I mean, true. I would also argue that one is, and this isn't a catch all, but you can never go wrong with the rivals to lovers trope. And not necessarily lovers, because rivals to friends is a legitimate trope and it usually goes out quite well. It's some of my favorite stuff. But like going back to Owl House, that's what it was. They ended up like disliking each other. There was a couple of episodes that's like, oh, maybe they're not so bad. And then you get the big episode with like, oh, Amity's a human and just has really messed up parent. Well, she's a witch, but has really messed up parents that pushed her into basically being a horrible person. And then she keeps coming back from everything.
I'd say again though, like that romance is built on the fact that they bring out interesting sides of each other and they push each other's development in very interesting ways. Because even before the Grom episode, their interactions with each other had very strong chemistry to it. Now, the initial interaction between them, they don't actually directly interact with each other. Both of them are on the opposite sides of an interaction with Willow. but you get enough of a dynamic there that you see the contrast in personality between these two. Luz is very carefree, very optimistic, and kind of a goofball, and Amity is very perfectionist, very control freak almost. So you have the foundation built there. But the episode that really explores that in an interesting way, that I would say sets up everything to come, is the library, where you actually see them getting to know each other as people, and what you have is it's the interaction between these two characters that informs the depth of both of them, more so than any other interaction Luz has had. So not only do you have Luz pushing Amity's development and giving insight into Amity, but Amity is the first character in the show to really push any deeper insight and development into Luz. That makes their interactions more interesting from the get-go.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing that I would suggest is romantic chemistry is great. I will always be a fan of it. And I know I have also been someone that is a big thing on, yeah, we ship the gay couples because they don't exist in most media. But platonic is something that's very important. And I think, honestly, it can make your relationship stuff stronger if you let the platonic relationship stay platonic. Not everything has to end up being a relationship, and I think that the comparison of it can help.
Oh yeah, platonic chemistry can be just as powerful. I know the Calamity Trio from Amphibia.
You're talking to the wrong person because I actually shipped the thruple.
Fine,
Like,
then.
you're not wrong. I get the platonic, and it gets back to my point of I'm aware I'm being hypocritical with this because I do ship a lot of these platonic couples or thruples. But at the same time, like, yes,
Okay, then
you're not wrong.
let me take another route with the same characters. Each member of the Calamity Trio has a bestie in uh in Utopia or in Amphibia, right?
Yeah.
Anne has Sprig, and that is a very strong there's very strong platonic chemistry between them. They build on each other incredibly well. Sprig builds Anne's confidence, makes her more of a responsible, more of a realized person. And I'd say that's very profound because when she first comes to Amphibia, she's not a fully realized person. That's part of her internal conflict, is she doesn't quite know who she is because she's always just bent over for Sasha. Or if she wasn't if she wasn't bending over backwards for whatever Sasha wanted, she was uh she was out of her depth trying to keep Marcy out of trouble.
Yeah, that is a
And
recurring thing.
so her entire character was informed by her relationship with her friends, and she didn't have anything for herself. And it's her relationship with Sprig that causes her to build something for herself. Likewise, Sasha, when she's introduced, is a very manipulative, very deceitful character. She doesn't have any sense of responsibility, she doesn't have any sense of honor, but it's her friendship with Grime that gives her an idea of honor. She starts to develop a real sense of loyalty and a real sense of duty simply because of that friendship, even though that friendship is what causes her to be antagonistic for a lot of the show. It does improve her as a person because she starts applying the lessons that she learns from her friendship with Grime to the friendship that she damaged with Anne and Marcy and starts repairing it. And
No, I mean,
and
I
then like
think part of why that one works, and admittedly why the ship goes in that, is because due to the species difference, the Calamity Trio can't be shipped with anyone but each other, really.
if there is
Like, you can, but
if there is anything that the 2013 Ninja Turtles show taught me, it is that viewers do not care about species difference. Because let me tell you,
yeah, but that goes back to the common decency thing where they should.
April Tello is real.
Although, okay, that's the one where it gets weird and where I'm like 50-50 is like, nah, the main show absolutely shipped her with the turtles, which in the more recent ones is fine, but you also got to remember in a lot of them, they are teenage mutant ninja turtles, and April was an adult.
Well, in that one, April was also a teenager. So it was less weird,
Yeah, and those are,
but it was still, they were shipping a turtle with a person. But
yeah,
honestly, it was incredibly well written. And that was the only
uh-huh.
thing making it weird, right?
Oh, absolutely. And they do that a lot, where it's like, yeah, this is a very well written relationship. Well, like what? I played Awakening. I've played every Fire Emblem game since. Like, it's been a thing. And the ship that I did with the character that looked underage was, unfortunately, it was with the, like, 50-year-old guy with an axe because they had a very sweet and adorable relationship that was only ruined by the fact that she looked like she was 12.
We're straying we're straying a bit back into what makes it bad, and I want to talk about what makes it good. And basically what it comes down to is what makes it good is that they need to good chemistry literally just means that characters provoke something in each other. You see a different side or a different aspect of this character when they interact with this character.
Yeah, it's they you don't need opposites attract, but as bad as it is, my view on relationships is the same one that I got from Scouts when I was a kid. Leave it better than you came. A relationship should be good for both people. If it's only good for one person, that's probably pretty toxic. Like, and that's how a lot of relationships work when they're not main plots. Is you end up with that, and I think that's the best thing. Is you're absolutely right. They should make each other happier by their existence, even if it's just when one of them walks into the room, it's shown that the other one just starts smiling. Like, you want that actual reaction to each other. You can have fights, but like there needs to be that actual care that they have for each other.
I will say, you can have good chemistry in a bad place and make a great story out of that. Um, so,
Yeah.
have you seen the newer Shira series?
Saw the first half. I believe the last I saw in Trapta just turned evil.
So I think you see where I'm going with this. Katra and Dodora, they
Oh yeah.
have,
Well, again, that goes into lover rivals turned lovers, and mind you, that one's lovers turned rivals turned lovers. But
yeah, they have fantastic chemistry throughout. Their chemistry, even when they are at each other's throats, their chemistry is perfect because they are vulnerable to each other. It really informs you a lot about who both of them are because even at their worst moments, even when they fully hate each other, no one reveals that side of them like they do for each other. And so
Yeah.
even at their worst, you kind of root for them. You root for them to figure it out. There's a part of you that wants them to heal and to get better because you can feel from that vulnerability that if they could just bridge this gap, they truly do love each other. And that's the heart of why their rivalry is so painful, is because even in the midst of it, that love between each other is still there. And it's not healthy at that point in time. But you want it to
No,
be.
and I think that also that comes down to one of the other basics is you need to have relationships that people want to root for. Like
Yeah.
when it comes down to, like, you can have these rough patches, you can have those. But if you don't want to root for the relationship, then why did you have the subplot in there?
Unless it was there for the purpose of you want them to root for someone to get out of this and to get away from it. There is a case for making a bad relationship and intentionally making making a toxic relationship, making because you can make good chemistry in a toxic relationship too. I will say that from a literary standpoint, from a writing standpoint, Joker and Harley Quinn have good chemistry in a negative relationship. Their chemistry is good in
That's
the
fair.
sense that they do inform the reader or the audience, depending on the medium, they inform the audience of a side of them that you don't see with other people. It's just in this case, it is informing the reader of the worst sides of them. And that's a case where they have great chemistry, but they have great chemistry because you want her to get the heck out of there.
Yeah, and there is such a thing as negative chemistry is a legitimate thing, and that's also fair. A lot of times the TV series do it as it's an ex that they're still trying to get over, where it's like, yeah, no, that works. Mind you, in so many of the rom-coms, they keep going back because the writers can't think of a proper plot, but that's just me whining.
I think an important part of why the Joker and Harley Quinn's chemistry works is because it is also very clearly one sided, and that's on purpose.
Oh, yeah.
The Joker is like very clearly doing it as a manipulation tactic. It's very calculated, and it's easy to tell how calculated that is, but it's easy to tell from the outside. He very much plays it to Harley. He is giving her a lot of attention and playing it as if he's not to keep her trying to please him.
Yeah,
He's
and you're not wrong.
he
It's just one of those. I don't like saying it as good chemistry. You can have good negative chemistry.
yeah, and that's what it is. And this is where I'm drawing the line between like positive chemistry and well-written chemistry. Their relationship is
Yeah,
incredibly well written because it's supposed to be toxic, it's supposed to be bad, and is supposed to put Harley in a place where she needs to seek healing and genuine love from someone else,
oh yeah.
namely a
I
certain redhead
do
of the
also.
floral persuasion.
Yeah, also a very good way of doing a healthy open relationship, which is quite nice. But there is one other thing, and I will admit this is a very petty statement on my end, but one of the best ways to have a good romance and have good chemistry is to follow through on it. And comic books tend to be the worst with this. The only reason why Harley gets to keep it is because she's not a main character.
So, do we want to talk about the wedding of Batman or the life of Peter Parker?
Honestly, I think that's a solid place to end. But
Yeah.
yeah, no, both of those are legitimate. I once again, I'm sorry, I keep going back to do positive by not doing negative, but this is my biggest pet peeve. And yeah, no, Catwoman and Batman is the biggest. Oh my, I want to strangle the writers. And it's why we get back to refrigerator wifing, where it's like, if you're going to have a relationship, you're going to put the time in. You're going to have this absolutely wonderful thing because Batman and Catwoman is. She softened him and basically took his rigid moral code and bent it just a little bit, and he gave her just that little bit more of a moral code, and they were perfect and they were wonderful, and they went on an adorably ridiculous double date with Superman and Lois, and it was fantastic. And then they threw it all out for the honestly one of the worst reasons. And that's part of it is again, you should change your partner by existing. Like it's not a bad change. It's not a bad thing to change, but by having a good romance, you shouldn't be the same on the other side of it.
Unfortunately, comic writers can't allow Batman to change from the absolute edge lord that he's been since the 90s.
Yeah, it does bug me that the most true statement about Batman was said sarcastically while Wonder Woman was flirting him in the animated series with no dating for the Batman might cut into the brooding time.
Didn't he immediately follow that up with, Diana, you're a princess and a literal demigoddess. I'm a rich kid with
And
issues. Lots of issues.
oh no, his follow up, absolutely a solid point. But the fact that line is painfully true outside of that point, like hurts my soul. Let characters develop. And again, that is a different discussion for another day, but let romance help develop the characters. Before Luz was with Amity, she was a different person. Like, yeah, Amity, like, she learned more restraint. She learned how to actually think a lot of things through. Like, for every single one of these relationships that we talked about, I mean, yeah, you have the lovers to rivals where it's like, yes, or rivals to lovers usually, where it's like, yes, I turned this man, I turned her good. And yeah, that's one of the simple ways, but at the same time, like, I'd 9 times out of 10, give me a Batman and Catwoman where both of them end up tweaking each other's boundaries, not breaking them, but just giving it that lightest nudge so both of them end up better off on the other end until someone pulls the plug because how dare there be character development in a comic book?
So, I want to touch on something interesting there because you brought up the rivals to lovers, and then I turned them good through the power of love, and that just makes my head go back to Catra and Adora again because
That was where it came from.
something that always like stuck out to me about that was that Adora didn't turn Catra good. Glimmer did.
Yeah, but
Catra,
I gotta ask, did Glimmer turn Catra good by any reference to the romance?
not to the romance, to the friendship. And that was something that was interesting. It wasn't Catra. So first off, Catra didn't even fully turn good in that moment. She made a good decision, and that was not a full redemption from her. She still had a road to go after that, and that road was self-driven. And that was a very strong point. of her arc. Um, Much in like the same vein as Zuko from Avatar: The Last Airbender, it's you can make the choice to be good, and that's you're not going to change who you are overnight. You still have to work at it. You still have to put the effort into becoming a better person.
Yeah.
And so that was a profound part of it. But the reason she made that decision wasn't wasn't because she loved Adora in the romantic sense. It wasn't to provoke feelings from Adora or anything like that. It wasn't a selfish reason in that sense. It was a moment of realization where she realized this person is important to someone that is important to me. I have everything I have done so far, I have done because I want this person, and I have never considered what this person wants. Right? I've never considered what Adora wants. And at that moment she realized if Adora comes here for Glimmer, she's going to get hurt. And that is what I don't want.
Yeah.
So she,
There's a point to be made there.
yeah, it's, but she makes that realization because she has that conversation with Glimmer and actually registers Glimmer as this isn't the person that stole Adora from me. This is a person that was a friend for Adora when she needed one.
Yeah.
It's a very powerful reframing and it works very well. And I would say that's another case of good non-romantic chemistry. That entire time where Glimmer and Catra are basically alone on Horde Prime's ship, not really alone, but when everyone is Horde Prime, they're the only two people that they can relate to each other. It is an excellent opportunity to have characters that would otherwise never interact in any sort of genuine or candid manner be in a situation where they kind of have to. And that
Yeah.
was what it took to make that reframing. Like I said, chemistry is when the interaction between two characters reveals a side or an aspect of them that you wouldn't have seen otherwise.
No, I think that's fair.
But yeah, long story short, you want to write good chemistry, romantic or otherwise, have characters reveal things about each other.
Oh, absolutely. The they need to. That's the thing, is a lot of relationships, you can't skip to the end. You gotta just have them talk.
And with all that said, my name is Flashfire. I am the author of the Max Speed book series. If you would like to check out my books, you can find them on Amazon or on the Bookworm website. That is BUCHWYRM.
And I'm Kitty, and it has been wonderful being here. I don't have socials. I don't really do anything productive with my time. So my suggestion is, if you like me, double down on this one and put a bunch of comments saying you want me back, as well as just subscribing, liking, trying to get that algorithm to stop hating people. Just anything helps.
Thank you very much, and we will see you next time.